Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something that is just a perfect storm of faith, profit, and some really high-stakes political brinkmanship.
It's a fascinating one. We're going to be dissecting a conflict that, on the surface, looked like it was about to start a war. But it wasn't about conquest. It wasn't about ideology.
No, it was about pure financial engineering. We're talking about a stunning, multi-layered scheme orchestrated by the Grand Nagus of the Ferengi Alliance, Zek himself.
It really is a masterclass in calculated risk. I mean, he turns what looks like a total diplomatic disaster into this ultimate business success. We've got a ton of sources detailing the whole standoff.
And it involves so many players. You have the sacred relics of the Bajoran people. You have the absolute desperation of the entrepreneur Quark.
And then you have the frustrating position of Starfleet, basically sidelined by its own government.
So our mission today is to trace this incredibly complex web. We're going to figure out how Zek used a beloved religious artifact as a lever to generate a massive, completely manufactured crisis.
Which then leads to staged warfare, financial double-dipping. It's a plan that only really reveals its, well, flawless design at the very end.
Let's unpack this. We have to start with what lit the fuse. A revered Bajoran religious artifact being put up for sale by the Grand Nagus.
The artifact at the center of all this is the Ninth Orb of the Prophets.
Okay, so for anyone who might not be deep into Bajoran theology, the orbs, they're canonically known as the Tears of the Prophets. These are not just, cultural items.
Not at all. They are absolutely central to the entire Bajoran faith. They're seen as these physical links connecting Bajor to the celestial temple, which is the home of their gods, the prophets.
So they're priceless. I mean, spiritually priceless.
Exactly. From a Bajoran perspective, putting a price tag on one is, it's blasphemy. It's completely beyond any kind of commercial transaction.
But Zek, of course, sees it differently.
Oh, absolutely. For Zek, that profound spirituality is just another factor to inflate the price. It's leverage. But before we even get to Zek's grand plan, we have to look at the immediate stakes for one person in particular.
Our favorite Ferengi entrepreneur on Deep Space Nine, Quark.
Quark. Just before this crisis hits, he is on top of the world.
He is in a state of what he calls financial ecstasy. He has just closed the best deal he's ever put together.
And his description of it is perfect. He calls it masterful and lucrative and just barely legal.
That little caveat, just barely legal, that's pure Quark, isn't it?
It is. He's celebrating because this deal, which was incredibly risky, was his ticket to his ultimate life goal.
Owning his own moon.
Owning his own moon. He's inspired by his, let's say, disreputable cousin Gila and his luxurious estate. And he's so high on this success, he's quoting the rules of acquisition to himself.
The 60-second rule of acquisition. The riskier the road, the greater the profit.
Right. For him, risk isn't danger, it's opportunity. It's the path to profit.
So he's on the verge of solvency, maybe for the first time in his life, and he thinks he's finally won. And then his moment of triumph is just completely shattered.
Violently interrupted by Major Kira Nerys, and this is where the crisis really kicks off.
Kira comes storming into his bar, and she tells him the problem isn't just that Zek is selling the orb, which is already a huge insult.
It's worse. Zek has specifically and deliberately removed the Bajorans from the bidding process entirely.
He's not even letting them bid on their own sacred artifact.
Exactly. This targeted exclusion is the first real act of provocation. And Kira, who has treasured the history of the orb since she was a child, is just incandescent with rage.
She sees it for what it is, not a business decision, but a calculated insult. It's a direct shot at Bajoran faith and their sovereignty.
And the Bajoran government's response is, well, it's swift and incredibly severe. They issue an ultimatum.
Grand Nagus Zek has 3 days. 3 days to reinstate Bajor in the auction.
And if he fails to do that, the consequences are not just for Zek.
No, this is what's so brutal. It's targeted at all Ferengi.
Every single one. This is where we need to stop and just really analyze the catastrophic implications here.
The edict is simple. All Ferengi will be evicted from Bajoran space.
Which goes so far beyond Quark just losing his bar, which is already devastating for him.
This is a disaster for the entire Ferengi Alliance. Losing Deep Space Nine means they lose their most crucial access point to the Gamma Quadrant wormhole.
And can you just spell out for us why that access is so non-negotiable for the Ferengi? It gets thrown around as future profit, but what does that really mean?
The Gamma Quadrant is Well, it's literally half the galaxy that's untouched by Ferengi commerce. You're talking about entire civilizations, new resources, billions of potential customers who have never even heard of the rules of acquisition.
It's a final frontier of capitalism for them.
It really is. The Alliance has poured massive resources into securing trade deals, into exploration. Losing access through that wormhole, which is right next to Bajor, it would cripple their entire long-term economic strategy.
And hand that opportunity over to their competitors. Or worse, the Dominion.
So from the outside, Zek is threatening to sacrifice the single most valuable asset the Ferengi have. Access to all that future profit, just to what? Maximize the price on one sale.
It seems completely insane from a Ferengi point of view.
And that's exactly what Quark thinks. He's desperately trying to apply pure Ferengi business logic to the situation. It's the only logic he trusts.
So he's trying to calm his brother, Rom, who's panicking, and Quark lays out his philosophy, which is, I think, perfect. He says, the holder of a simple auction makes the most profit by selling his goods to the highest bidder.
Simple, right? Losing the Gamma Quadrant would diminish Zek's profit margin by an exponential amount. It doesn't add up.
The loss would be catastrophic.
Yeah.
It would far outweigh whatever price he could get for the orb.
This internal logic is completely sound, which is why Zek's next move is such a profound shock. It's the first real sign that Zek is playing a different game entirely.
A game that Quark can't even begin to comprehend yet.
He contacts Zek's financial functionary, this guy Zerl, expecting to hear that Zek has caved.
And instead, he gets the stunning news. Zek will not reinstate the Bajorans.
He's doubling down.
It's a deliberate, calculated rejection of conventional business sense. It's designed specifically to trigger the Bajoran ultimatum, and it just leaves Quark numb. He's not just facing financial ruin.
He's facing the ultimate humiliation, moving back to Ferenginar to live with his mother.
The horror.
So Zek is intentionally violating the core tenets of his own culture's capitalism. He's knowingly triggering a financial catastrophe for thousands of his own people. The question is why?
And that's where the story pivots. It moves from a business dispute into a high-stakes political failure.
Which is exactly where Zek needed it to go. He had to make sure that the Federation's non-interventionist policy would hold firm. He needed them to stay out of it.
As this whole crisis is spiraling, Zek's plan really hinges on two things. First, that the Bajorans will be, predictably aggressive in defending their faith.
Check.
And second, that the Federation will remain completely, stubbornly neutral.
So Quark, watching his whole life crumble, does the only logical thing. He goes to Captain Sisko for help.
He appeals for protection. And he frames the Bajoran edict as, well, fundamentally unjust, even racist. He's punishing all Ferengi for the actions of one.
And it's a strong argument. Sisko is running Starfleet operations in the sector. He should be concerned about this kind of collective punishment.
And Sisko actually agrees with him on a moral level. He tells Quark directly, the Bajorans should not punish innocent Ferengi for the actions of the Nagus. He's not without empathy here.
But there's always a but.
Then comes the political reality, the constraint that Zek was absolutely banking on. Sisko looks at Quark and says, his hands are tied.
And this isn't just a figure of speech. There's a specific rule, a number attached to it.
Resolution 49-535.
Yeah.
And that resolution is the key to everything here. The Federation Council passed it, and it formally classified this orb conflict as a solely Bajoran matter.
Why? Because Bajor isn't a full Federation member.
That's a huge part of it. Bajor isn't a member, and the conflict is over a matter of faith and commerce with another non-aligned power, the Ferengi Alliance. So Starfleet was explicitly forbidden from intervening. They couldn't even provide overt support to Ferengi nationals on the station.
Okay, but if Sisko personally believes Quark is innocent, why couldn't he just, make a call? Use his political capital with the Bajoran First Minister, Shakar. They've worked together.
He refuses. He tells Quark point blank, we are not friends. And then adds, I wouldn't be your friend if you paid me.
Ouch.
It's harsh, but it underscores the severity of the situation. Sisko knew that any move, even a friendly off-the-record chat with Shakar, could be seen as a breach of Resolution 49-535.
And that could get him removed from command.
And further compromise Starfleet's entire neutral position. Zek had successfully and completely neutralized the biggest military power in the whole sector.
So with the Federation sidelined, the deadline passes. The eviction order is enforced.
And Quark and Rom, they make a desperate, really ill-advised attempt to flee the station. They think they can find refuge somewhere.
But they're arrested almost immediately on Bajor by Bajoran security, a Lieutenant Carlian and Sergeant O'Neill, and this. This is where the very real human cost of Zek's scheme becomes agonizing.
They're taken to Galleytep. Now, that name alone, Galleytep, it's a horrific name in Bajoran history.
It was a Kardashian labor camp, right? Notorious for atrocity.
Exactly. The fact that the Bajoran government reopened and repurposed this site, that should have been a massive red flag to Sisko. It showed just how far the Bajorans were willing to go.
And the camp is put under the command of a Colonel Mitra,
Who Quark later remembers with pure terror as the Butcher of Galleytep.
and the details we have from this period are just chilling. Rom actually recorded his experiences. He details horrific abuse, torture.
He even witnessed the death of another prisoner, a civilian contractor named Zort, who was beaten to death by a Sergeant White.
Mitra's goal seems to be pure psychological degradation.
It was. And the sources detail how he used threats that were specifically targeted at their core Ferengi identity. He tormented Rom with the threat of cutting off his right hand.
Which is devastating. It's not just a physical threat, it's symbolic. There's history there.
A specific callback. Quark once lost the title to Rom's hand in a bad business deal. For a Ferengi, losing a hand means losing the ability to count profit, to sign contracts. It's a symbolic castration of the businessman.
And the threats against Quark are even more visceral. They go right for the ears.
Mitra threatens to slice off one of Quark's large ears. The ears are the most significant, even erogenous part of a Ferengi body. Their auditory sense is supposedly so acute they can feel the flow of commerce. The threat is designed to induce absolute terror.
And it works. The psychological toll is immense. Quark, who's normally so unflappable, he starts suffering from constant insomnia. His mind can't rest because he has all these incomplete business deals.
His nightmares are just filled with Mitra torturing him. Rom is suffering physically and mentally. But crucially, even in prison, his engineering mind starts to notice things, discrepancies.
Especially about the smuggler, Court, who was involved in their arrest.
Right. This suffering isn't just filler in the story. It is the core of the moral price that Bajor paid for Zek's grand financial scheme.
And it's important to remember the timeline here. While innocent Ferengi are being imprisoned and tortured, Bajor is escalating.
Massively. First Minister Shakar, feeling abandoned by the Federation and probably pushed by the righteous fury of his people, is actively preparing for war.
He brokers a major deal. He acquires 35 heavily shielded ships, defensive transports, from the Iridians.
And this is the point where the crisis starts to actively compromise Federation security, even if Sisko can't officially intervene.
Because the payment for these ships is what set off all the alarms for Sisko.
Shakar agrees to give the Iridians access to all data relayed to Deep Space Nine through the wormhole.
Data that Sisko argues contains sensitive Starfleet intelligence. Why would Shakar make a deal like that? He's compromising his biggest ally.
Desperation. His government felt completely exposed. They had issued an ultimatum to a major power, the Ferengi Alliance, and their protector, the Federation, had just walked away because of Resolution 49535.
They were afraid of a massive Ferengi counterattack.
They needed ships, hard assets right now, and the Iridians, who were basically information brokers, not shipbuilders, they exploited that desperation completely.
Sisko figured out pretty quickly that the Iridians didn't build the ships themselves. They likely bought them from the Karema.
The Iridians were just the opaque middleman.
So let's recap. Zek's first, seemingly illogical move, refusing to sell the orb, has now led to the torture of innocent Ferengi.
The compromise of Federation security data.
And Bajor acquiring a clandestine, heavily armed fleet.
It is a stunning cascade of negative consequences, all generated by a single act of defiance.
And this whole cascade was absolutely necessary for Zek to get to the next stage of his plan.
Which was generating the official casus belli, the justification for war.
We've reached the tipping point. Bajor is armed. The Ferengi have been kicked out of the wormhole. Now the manipulation shifts from, economic and political pressure to outright tactical warfare.
But a very specific kind of warfare. A war designed to be seen.
The Bajoran ships arrive, all 35 of them. They're heavily shielded, and importantly, they're not communicating.
Sisko and his crew, they're still stuck with the non-intervention mandate, but they are intensely worried. They know a conflict is coming.
And it doesn't take long. A Ferengi marauder, the Nemes, engages a couple of these new Bajoran transports right near the station.
And this engagement, this is the engineered battle. The technical details that the Defiant crew observe are the definitive proof of Zeiss' deception.
Sisko, Worf, and Chief O'Brien are watching the whole thing from the bridge of the Defiant.
The Bajoran ships open fire, but Worf immediately notes something's wrong. Phaser activity is at only about 10% of normal power.
10%, that's nothing.
It's bafflingly low, and yet, despite this, the Bajoran transports somehow managed to disable the Marauder's main plasma weapon, and then the ship just vanishes in a flash.
Seemingly taking over 250 Ferengi crew members with it.
Now, why would that seem impossible to Starfleet officers? A Marauder is a warship?
And a transport is just a transport. A Ferengi Marauder is notoriously well-shielded, heavily armed. O'Brien and Worf, two of the best tactical minds in the sector, they look at the readings and it just doesn't compute.
Those Bajoran ships, even with retrofits, they should not have had the firepower to get through the Marauder's shields with a shot at 10% power. It's impossible.
So Sisko's looking at the sensor logs, and they're full of conflicting data. High-energy impact readings, but low-energy output from the phasers. It makes no sense.
And that's the moment. That's what tips them off. The realization that they weren't just observing a battle.
They were being fed false readings. The battle wasn't a fight. It was a piece of theater.
It was a stage play. The Ferengi staged the whole thing. The Marauder likely used some kind of powerful short-duration countermeasure or a holographic shield to make the Bajoran phasers look way more effective than they were.
Or they just beamed their crew off and blew the ship up themselves.
Exactly. A self-destruct sequence designed to mimic a catastrophic weapon hit. The critical point is that Zek wanted the defiant, the neutral, credible witness to log this event as a brutal, unprovoked attack by the Bajorans.
By making Bajor look like the aggressor, Zek accomplishes two things. He gets his justification for war.
And crucially, he ensures the Federation will continue to stay out of it. They can't defend a clear aggressor.
The justification arrives just hours later.
Grand Nagus Zek sends a direct, official message to First Minister Shakar, and he lays it all out. He cites Bajor's provocations.
He lists the expulsion of Ferengi nationals, the closing of the wormhole.
And the centerpiece of his argument, the brutal attack by two Bajoran starships on a Ferengi starship, causing the loss of all hands, and witnessed by the Starfleet vessel USS Defiant.
And with that, he formally declares war on Bajor. The speed of this is just staggering.
And the consequences for Starfleet are immediate. And for Sisko, they're devastating. Admiral Whatley gets on the line looking grim and orders the immediate evacuation of all Starfleet personnel from DS9.
How long do they have?
14 hours.
That's it.
That's it. Sisko is explicitly ordered to take the Defiant and his senior staff to Starbase Icarus. The order is designed to give him zero wiggle room, no latitude to operate or intervene.
They're making sure Starfleet follows Resolution 49-535 to the letter.
To the absolute letter. And Sisko is he's devastated. He feels like he's abandoning the Bajorans in their moment of greatest need. He's being forced to leave them to face the full might of the Ferengi military machine alone.
He has no choice. Zek has perfectly leveraged the Federation's own rules against them to force their withdrawal. He's secured the entire theater of operations for himself.
The stage is set for a war that Bajor, even with their new ships, cannot possibly win.
But wait a minute. Something doesn't add up there. If Zek wanted to secure the area for a war, why did he let humanitarian aid through his blockade earlier? Sisko noted that he found it inexplicable. A blockade is supposed to starve the enemy, right?
That is a brilliant point. And it's a huge piece of foreshadowing for Zek's true motivation. A total, destructive war that crushes Bajor and gets Ferengi banned forever, that would destroy the wormhole access point permanently.
It's bad for business in the long run.
It's terrible for business. Zek didn't want a long, destructive war. He wanted a short, profitable crisis. He lets the aid through because he doesn't want the Bajoran people to develop a deep, lasting hatred of the Ferengi.
He's protecting future markets.
He's looking after future profits, even in the middle of his staged war. It's a calculated move to make sure a diplomatic solution stays on the table.
And that diplomatic solution relies entirely on one person.
One desperate Ferengi entrepreneur who has just escaped from a torture camp.
The only person who can possibly destabilize Zek's perfectly manufactured crisis is Quark.
But Quark's arrival on the Defiant, it wasn't luck. It wasn't a fortunate coincidence.
It was choreographed, like everything else.
It was, just as choreographed as the battle.
So walk us through the escape from Galatep. It sounds pretty harrowing.
Oh, Quark and Rom are at their absolute lowest point. They are broken, physically and mentally. They're convinced they're about to be mutilated. They manage to get out on a shuttle piloted by a guy named Court, who Quark just assumes is a smuggler.
But Rom, even after everything he's been through, he starts to realize the truth.
His engineer's mind is working. He realizes Court's homing device was useless. And the engine failure the court claimed they
Yeah,
had.
faked a deliberate system failure.
Court steered their shuttle directly into the path of the evacuating Defiant. Zek literally gift-wrapped the solution and delivered it right to Sisko's doorstep.
So Sisko, who's in the middle of packing up his office, his baseball, getting ready to leave, he rescues these two Ferengi.
He grants them asylum immediately. But he also realizes this. This refugee is his last, best chance to salvage the situation. It's a way to defy his orders, at least in spirit.
So he makes Quark an offer, an incentive that speaks directly to Quark's soul.
He tells him, convince Zek to sell the orb to Bajor. And if you do, Sisko will personally guarantee you and Rom get amnesty, the return of Quark's bar. And, the most important part, Starfleet's continued presence on Deep Space Nine once the crisis is over.
That's everything Quark wants.
It's everything. A chance to get his assets back, his business, his life. He accepts immediately. He's transported to Ferengi to meet with Zek.
In the opulent chamber of the sun.
Right. And even this setting is a subtle bit of Ferengi theater. Quark notes that the whole Grand Chamber is actually just a hologram.
Because the weather outside is terrible. It's a perfect blend of extravagant appearance and cheap, practical reality.
It is. So Quark approaches the Nagus, who seems to be just relishing the drama of it all.
And Quark's argument is brilliant. He doesn't use sentimentality, he doesn't make threats. He comes at Zek with pure, unassailable business logic.
He argues that Zek's war is just. It's bad business. He makes the strategic case that if the Ferengi win the war, they'll have to take over the permanent and very costly defense of the wormhole.
And why is that such a liability? Wouldn't controlling the gateway to the Gamma Quadrant be the ultimate prize?
You'd think so, but controlling a strategic choke point means you attract strategic enemies. If the Ferengi Alliance suddenly claims military ownership of the wormhole, they immediately draw the attention of every other major power.
The Klingons, the Romulans.
Especially the Dominion, who've already shown they're willing to just annihilate ships coming through. Quark argues that the required defensive spending to protect that gateway would far outweigh any profit they could ever make.
So the wormhole switches from being an economic asset to a massive, unsustainable military liability.
It's a profound strategic insight. And it's why he quotes the 76th rule of acquisition.
Every once in a while, declare peace. It suggests that knowing when to cut your losses, or pivot from military spending back to commerce, is the mark of a truly great businessman.
And Zek is genuinely impressed. He praises Quark's fine business instincts. He agrees to consider it, but he asks a key question. What's Quark's personal profit in all this? He's always looking for the angle.
He's intrigued that Sisko is using Quark as a pawn. He sees the value in that relationship.
The negotiation is a success. Zek agrees to sell the orb to Bajor, but under 4 extremely strict conditions.
Okay, what are they?
The first 3 are pretty straightforward. 1, Bajor has to buy the Ninth Orb at the highest price that was bid.
Which Quark correctly guesses was Bajor's own bid in the first place.
Exactly. 2, Bajor has to rescind the edict banning all Ferengi from their space.
Restores market access.
And 3, Bajor has to pay the Ferengi Alliance for all expenses incurred during the blockade and the war effort.
So he's getting paid for his own manufactured crisis.
These first 3 conditions secure all the immediate financial goals. He sells the artifact, he restores commercial access, and he profits from the cost of the war. But the 4th condition, that's the masterstroke.
That's the one that unlocks the whole grand design.
And that condition is, Bajor must sell the 35 defensive transports they just bought to the Ferengi Alliance.
The very same ships?
The very same ships. And that condition, combined with the war reparations, is the definitive proof that the entire conflict was manufactured from start to finish.
Okay, let's connect all the dots here. This is the moment where the full scope of Zek's strategy is revealed.
And it starts with Quark admitting his own mistake. He confesses that he initially believed Zek was losing his abilities as a financial tactician.
He thought Zek was breaking Rule 62 by choosing risk over profit when he kicked Bajor out of the auction.
But the error wasn't Zek's. It was Quark's limited perspective. And the pieces all click into place for Quark when he remembers his own great deal from months ago.
The just barely legal one that was supposed to get him his moon.
That deal was him brokering the sale of those very same 35 starships to the Iridians. Zek's alliance had old, obsolete inventory they needed to get rid of, and Quark was the one who moved it for them.
And Sisko had thought the ships came from the Karema.
But no. Quark had unknowingly brokered the sale from the Ferengi Alliance to the Iridians. Zek's entire scheme. It was never about the orb.
It was about moving outdated inventory at a massive secondary profit.
And now we can trace the whole flawless five-step calculation. Step 1, intentional expulsion.
Zek kicks Bajor out of the auction, knowing they'll react by closing the wormhole, the risky road.
Which creates the crisis. Step 2, inventory liquidation and geopolitical leverage.
The crisis makes the Bajorans hostile and desperate. They need to arm themselves immediately, so they buy Zek's old, unwanted ships from the Uridian middleman.
And the cost to Bajor is huge. They give up all that sensitive DS9 data. So Zek solves his inventory problem and gets his hands on valuable intelligence by proxy.
Step 3, the masterful ruse and neutrality.
He sets up the blockade, but lets aid through to manage public opinion. Then he stages the fake battle with the low-powered phasers and the false sensor readings for the Defiant to witness.
Which locks in the Federation's commitment to Resolution 49-535 and guarantees they won't intervene.
Step 4. Forced negotiation.
He declares war, a war he has no intention of fighting for long. The threat of annihilation is just a negotiation tactic. It's a closing mechanism to force Shakaar to the peace table immediately.
And finally, Step 5. The final payoff. The peace terms are just a masterclass in profit maximization.
He sells the Ord at the highest price.
He gets paid for all his war expenses, turning his military posturing into a revenue stream.
He regains immediate access to the wormhole.
And he buys back his own 35 obsolete ships, the ones Quark sold, for a nominal fee as part of the reparations package.
So he sold the inventory once for a big profit to the Uridians, and then he gets paid to take it back from Bajor after the ships have served their purpose as a geopolitical chess piece.
He profited from the sale, he profited from the war, and he profited from the peace treaty. It is financial brilliance on a truly terrifying scale. He leveraged an entire civilization's faith and security just for inventory control.
But he wasn't done. There was one final, crucial loose end he needed to tie up.
The manipulation of perceptions. And Quark realizes he was just the final piece in that part of the plan.
Court, the smuggler. He was working for Zek all along.
His job was to deliver Quark to Sisko via that faked engine failure at the perfect moment after the war was declared, but before the evacuation was complete.
But why? Why that extra layer of deception?
Because Zek wanted Sisko to believe that Quark, the humble, greedy bar owner, had successfully negotiated the impossible. That Quark had manipulated the Grand Nagus into ending the war.
He's building Quark's reputation.
He's building Quark's credibility. Zek saw that restoring Sisko's trust in Quark was a valuable long-term investment.
He figured that by enhancing Quark's standing, Quark could capture the captain's ear at some point in the future. A useful asset to have near the wormhole.
And the manipulation worked perfectly.
It did. Major Kira, when she hears that Quark was the one who brokered the peace, she actually goes to him and apologizes. She says she was wrong about him.
So Zeke successfully leveraged the entire Alpha Quadrant, manufactured a war that resulted in 0 deaths, all to ensure his obsolete inventory was moved, and his own reputation for ruthless genius was cemented.
So, when you pull back and look at the whole thing, what's the big takeaway here?
Zeke proved he was not losing his touch. Not at all. He executed this incredibly convoluted scheme that achieved profit on so many different levels. The artifact sale, the war reparations, the resale of his old inventory, and securing future access to the Gamma Quadrant.
He took that massive financial risk, like Rule 62 says, and the profit was exponentially greater than if he'd just sold the orb in a simple auction.
It's an incredible story of political maneuvering, a massive crisis, a whole civilization threatened, Starfleet on the verge of evacuation, and it all ends in a huge financial windfall for the puppet master.
All while keeping the Federation completely neutral.
Indeed. The war itself lasted less than 2 hours, and later confirmations showed it resulted in 0 deaths in space. However, there's a final, lingering question. The Bajorans were still investigating how Colonel Mitra managed to reopen and resupply the Gallitep prison camps so quickly.
And the First Minister's official letter notes that Mitra's body has still not been located.
Which leaves you with a final, provocative thought. If the war was a brilliant, profitable sham engineered by Zek that resulted in 0 casualties in space, how do you account for the very real horror, the torture, the reported death that happened inside Gallitep? Was Mitra just some rogue sadist acting on his own? Or was the brutality of Gallitep also a calculated element of the plan? A piece of necessary collateral damage that Zek simply wrote off as a war expense designed to make sure the Bajoran government's fury was real enough to validate his claim for war reparations. The financial genius of Zek may have covered for a much darker, deeper conspiracy one, designed to ensure the price of peace was paid in blood and terror, all for the sake of moving obsolete starships.